Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. Before I begin, I'd appreciate it if you'd let me know in the comments where you're watching from around the world. It's always humbling to see how far these stories travel. The story I'm about to share is a deeply personal one, a chapter of my life that I thought would break me, but instead, it forged me into something stronger. It all began with a single, devastating text message that appeared on my phone screen on a Tuesday afternoon. It was from my youngest son, Leo, and it contained only a handful of words, but they landed with the force of a physical blow. The message read, "Father, tonight my brother and sister are going to take your money, so I acted before they could." To understand the gravity of those words, you need to understand my family. I'm a widower. My beautiful wife, Eleanor, passed away a decade ago, leaving me to raise our 3 children into adulthood alone. Daniel is the oldest, Chloe is the middle child, and Leo is the baby of the family. I built a successful logistics company from the ground up, working punishing hours for 30 years to provide a life for them that was worlds away from my own meager upbringing. I sold the company 5 years ago for a sum that ensured none of us would ever have to worry about money again. But my children, particularly Daniel and Chloe, never saw the struggle. They only saw the result. They grew up in a world where no was a suggestion, not a boundary. My generosity, which I thought was a father's love, became their expectation. For them, I wasn't their father. I was a financial institution. Daniel, at 32, had the ambition of a king, but the work ethic of a court jester. He drifted from one revolutionary business idea to the next, each one requiring a hefty seed investment from me. First, it was a bespoke sock subscription service. That cost me $50,000. Then, it was an artisanal coffee shop that only served coffee grown on a specific, windswept mountain in Peru. Another $75,000. Each venture failed, and each time, he would return with a new, even grander scheme, his failure never denting his staggering sense of entitlement. He drove a luxury SUV that was in my name. He lived in a condo downtown for which I had not only paid the down payment, but continued to cover the mortgage because his ventures were always on the verge of turning a profit, but never quite did. Chloe, at 29, was different, but no less draining. Her currency was lifestyle. She saw life as something to be curated for social media, a series of expensive backdrops for her carefully constructed image. There were the quarterly trips to Europe, the designer wardrobe that was constantly being updated, the high-end apartment filled with furniture that cost more than my first car. She had a degree in art history, but had never held a job for more than 6 months. She'd always quit, claiming the environment was toxic or her boss didn't appreciate her vision. In reality, she simply didn't want to work. Her allowance, a sum that many families would consider a full-time salary, was always spent before the month was out, leading to tearful phone calls about unforeseen expenses and credit card debt that I, foolishly, always cleared. And then there was Leo. At 22, he was the quiet observer. He was in his final year of university, studying engineering. He worked a part-time job on campus, not because he needed the money, but because he said he wanted to. He never asked for anything beyond his tuition, which I was more than happy to pay. He saw the dynamic with his siblings for what it was, a parasitic relationship. He saw their disrespect, the way they'd roll their eyes when I'd tell a story, the way they'd immediately pivot any conversation back to their own needs. I had always ignored these red flags. I told myself this was just a phase, that they would mature. I had mistaken their blatant materialism for ambition and their disrespect for youthful confidence. I was a fool. Eleanor would have seen it. She was always the astute one, the one who understood the nuances of our children's personalities. I was just the provider, the one who wrote the checks, hoping that my financial support was a valid substitute for the emotional wisdom my wife would have provided. The text message from Leo shattered that delusion. I sat there in my study, the room where I had signed the deal that set my family up for life, and read it again. "Father, tonight my brother and sister are going to take your money." I immediately called him. His voice was tense, filled with a mixture of anger and guilt. He told me he had overheard them. They had come to his apartment, not to visit, but to strategize. They were planning to come to my house for dinner that evening under the pretense of family gathering. Their actual goal was an ambush. They had convinced themselves that I was getting old and mentally frail, that my careful, conservative management of my wealth was foolish. They had documents drawn up. They were going to pressure me, bully me, and emotionally manipulate me in assigning over a significant portion of my assets to them, perhaps even granting Daniel power of attorney. They called it securing their future. I called it what it was, a coup, a betrayal of the highest order. After I hung up with Leo, a profound sadness washed over me. It was a grief so deep it felt like losing my wife all over again. I had failed them. My love, my money had not built them up. It had hollowed them out, creating two beautiful, empty shells who saw their own father as an obstacle to be managed, a vault to be cracked. I sat in silence for a good hour. The photos on my desk, of a smiling Eleanor, of the 3 kids as toddlers covered in mud, seemed to mock me. But then, as the sun began to dip lower in the sky, the sadness began to recede, replaced by something else. It was a cold, quiet clarity, a feeling as hard and pure as diamond. The grief was gone, burned away by a sudden, resolute anger. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They had mistaken my patience for senility. They believed that after years of me saying yes, I had forgotten how to say no. They were about to receive a lesson in the word's finality. Enough was enough. The bank of Dad was officially and permanently closed. I picked up the phone. My first call was to Richard Blackwood, my wealth manager for the past 20 years. Richard was a no-nonsense man who had been subtly warning me for years about Daniel and Chloe's spending habits. "Richard," I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. "It's time. We're executing the Scorched Earth Protocol." Richard didn't ask questions. He simply said, "I'll get the team ready." "What's the first move?" The Scorched Earth Protocol was a contingency plan we had designed years ago, a hypothetical exercise in asset protection. Now it was very real. Over the next 3 hours, I became a general commanding a financial army from the quiet of my study. First, the trusts. I had established 3 irrevocable trusts, one for each child, funded with a significant amount of stock from my company's sale. They were designed to pay out upon my death. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Helen, had at my insistence included a little-known but powerful clause allowing the grantor, me, to swap the assets in the trust with assets of equal value. With Richard's help, we initiated the swap. We moved the blue-chip stocks and growth funds out of Daniel and Chloe's trusts. We replaced them with a single, non-voting share in a shell corporation I owned that had 0 assets and was registered in Delaware. Its value was technically $1, but for legal purposes of the swap, we valued it at the exact worth of the stocks we removed. It was perfectly legal, and it effectively neutered their inheritance. Leo's trust, however, I instructed Richard to double, transferring the assets from his siblings' trust directly into his. Next, the direct lines of credit. Chloe's allowance was a direct deposit from a specific investment account. I logged into the portal and terminated the automatic payment schedule. Then, I transferred the entire balance of that account, several $1,000,000, to a new account at a different institution to which she had no visibility or connection. The account she had come to see as her personal entitlement was now an empty vessel. I then went through my credit card accounts. I was the primary holder on 3 separate cards for which Daniel and Chloe were authorized users. They used these for everything from gas to groceries to $5,000 handbags. I logged into each portal. One by one, I clicked Report Card Lost/Stolen and Remove Authorized User within minutes. The pieces of plastic in their wallets would become useless. The next call was to my lawyer, Helen. "Helen, I need you to draft 2 eviction notices immediately," I said. She had the documents ready in 20 minutes. Daniel's condo and Chloe's apartment were both owned by an LLC I controlled. They lived there rent-free, another one of my endless subsidies. I signed the eviction notices electronically. They would be served by a courier the next morning, giving them 30 days to vacate the properties. My properties. Helen then got to work on the cars. The SUV Daniel drove and the convertible Chloe paraded around and were also owned by my LLC. We contacted the repossession company we had on retainer for my old business. I sent them the VIN numbers and the addresses. I told them to pick up the vehicles at 6 a.m. the following morning. I wanted my children to wake up to the first tangible consequence of their greed. The final piece was the most symbolic. Years ago, I had made Daniel a signatory on a business checking account. It was supposed to be for his sock company, but he used it as a personal slush fund. There was still about $15,000 in it. I didn't just transfer the money out. I called the bank's fraud department. I explained that my signatory had been using the account for non-business purposes, a violation of the terms. I requested the account be frozen and closed immediately, pending an investigation. It was a small amount of money in the grand scheme of things, but the gesture was significant. It was the last financial cord, and I was severing it with a blowtorch. By 5 p.m., it was all done. A decade of financial enabling had been dismantled in under 3 hours. I felt strangely calm, detached. It was as if I was watching a movie of my own life. I looked at the picture of Eleanor. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see it," I whispered. Then, I went into the kitchen and began to prepare dinner, just as they would expect. Around 6:30, Chloe called. Her voice was a symphony of irritation. "Dad, this is so embarrassing. My card was just declined at Nordstrom. I was buying a new dress for dinner tonight. You need to call the credit card company. There must be some kind of fraud alert." I feigned ignorance. "Oh, that's strange, honey. I'm sure it's just a glitch. Don't worry about a new dress. Just come as you are. I can't wait to see you." She huffed and hung up. The first domino had fallen. A few minutes later, a text from Daniel. "Dad, the bank app is acting weird. Says my account is suspended. Fix it." I didn't reply. Their arrogance was a shield, preventing them from seeing the truth. They couldn't conceive of a world where the money tap wasn't just temporarily clogged, but had been ripped out of the wall entirely. At 7 p.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. There they were, Daniel and Chloe, standing on my doorstep. My doorstep, in front of my house. Daniel was dressed in a blazer he thought made him look like a CEO, and Chloe had managed to find something suitably expensive to wear. They carried with them an air of rehearsed gravity, like actors preparing for a dramatic scene. They also carried a bottle of wine, which was a nice touch of hypocrisy. "Dad," Daniel said, clapping me on the shoulder with false warmth. "Good to see you, you too," I said, my voice even. "Come in. Dinner is almost ready." We sat in the dining room, the table set with the good china Eleanor had loved. The irony was thick enough to choke on. They were here to perform a financial execution at the very table where we had celebrated every birthday, every holiday, every family milestone. They made small talk, their eyes occasionally darting towards each other, a silent communication passing between them. I played my part, asking about their week, pretending not to notice the tension coiling in the room. Finally, after I had served the main course, Daniel cleared his throat. The show was about to begin. "Dad," he started, his voice dripping with faux concern. "Chloe and I have been talking, and we're worried about you," Chloe chimed in, her face a mask of practiced sympathy. "We are. You've been working your whole life. You deserve to relax, to not have to worry about managing everything. The market is so complex these days." I took a slow sip of water, watching them over the rim of my glass. I let the silence hang in the air. "Go on," I said. Daniel leaned forward, placing a leather-bound folder on the table. "We've been working with a financial advisor, a real top guy. He's put together a proposal for you. It's about restructuring your portfolio for more aggressive growth. And it's also about legacy planning, ensuring the family's future is secure." He slid the folder across the table. I didn't open it. I knew what was inside. Legal documents, signature lines waiting for my name, transfer and control. "It also involves setting up a new family management structure," Chloe added softly, "with Daniel taking a more active role in day-to-day oversight. It's too much for you to handle alone, Dad." There it was. The demand wrapped in the language of love. The dagger presented as a gift. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of their betrayal. They sat there, my son and my daughter, the two children I had given everything to, and they were attempting to declare me incompetent, to strip me of my autonomy and my wealth, all for their own selfish gain. They saw me not as their father, but as a doddering old fool standing between them and a lifestyle they felt they deserved but were unwilling to earn. I looked from Daniel's smug face to Chloe's expectant one. The cold resolve returned, washing away any lingering pain. It was time. I appreciate your concern, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. It's touching, but I have to say, your timing is impeccable. A flicker of confusion crossed Daniel's face. What do you mean? I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out 3 envelopes. I placed one in front of Daniel and one in front of Chloe. The third I kept by my side. I've been doing some restructuring of my own today, I explained. I've decided it's time for you both to finally experience the independence you so clearly crave. Go on, open them. They exchanged a nervous glance. This was not part of their script. With trembling fingers, Daniel opened his envelope. His confident smirk vanished, replaced by a pale, slack-jawed disbelief. Chloe opened hers, and a small gasp escaped her lips. Her eyes darted over the pages, widening with each sentence. I didn't need to see the documents to know what they were reading. Daniel was holding a copy of the 30-day eviction notice for his condo. He was also holding a letter from my lawyer formally notifying him that the vehicle he was driving would be repossessed in the morning, and that the corporate bank account he had been using was now frozen and under investigation for misuse of funds. Chloe was reading her own eviction notice, her own vehicle repossession letter, and a final statement for the credit card she had tried to use earlier, showing a 0 balance and a closed status. What is this? Daniel finally stammered, his voice a choked whisper. Is this a joke? I assure you, it is not a joke, I said calmly. These are the consequences of your actions. You see, I know why you're really here tonight. You're not here because you're worried about me. You're here to take what you believe is yours. You came here to stage a financial coup, to declare your own father incompetent, so you could get your hands on his money faster. Chloe started to cry, the manufactured crocodile tears she always used to get her way. Dad, no, that's not true. We love you. Love. I let out a short, bitter laugh. You don't love me. You love what I provide. You love the cars, the apartments, the endless stream of money that has allowed you to live like royalty without ever doing a single day of honest work. That instant night, I picked up the 3rd envelope. This is a letter from my attorney, I said, looking directly at both of them. It confirms that the assets within your respective trusts have been legally swapped out. Your inheritance, the one you were so eager to get your hands on, is gone. It has been redirected. Daniel's face was purple with rage. He shot to his feet, slamming his hands on the table. You can't do that. That's our money. We'll sue you. You're welcome to try, I replied, my voice like ice. You can use your own money to hire a lawyer. Oh, wait. You don't have any. You see, every single thing you have, your homes, your cars, your bank accounts, was never truly yours. It was all mine, and I'm taking it all back. My house, my money, my rules. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by Chloe's pathetic sobs. The arrogance and entitlement had been stripped away, leaving behind 2 terrified, spoiled children finally facing the void they had created for themselves. The confrontation was over. They left without another word, leaving their untouched dinner and their folder of lies on my dining room table. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The next morning, as promised, their cars were gone. The eviction notices were served. Their cards were useless. They called me, of course, dozens of times. First came the screaming and the threats, then the tearful apologies and promises to change. I didn't answer. I let them all go to voicemail. I needed them to understand that this was not a negotiation. It was a verdict. They were forced to move in together into a small, rented apartment. They had to sell their designer clothes and watches for cash. Daniel had to get a job in sales, working on commission. Chloe found work as a waitress. For the first time in their lives, they were forced to confront the basic reality of earning a living. It was a humbling, painful education. My relationship with them is, for now, non-existent. The wound is too deep. Perhaps one day, if they truly change, we can rebuild. But it will be on my terms, based on respect, not dependency. As for Leo, I brought him to my lawyer's office the following week. I showed him the third envelope. I explained what I had done, that I had transferred the entirety of his siblings' trust funds into his. He was stunned, but then he did something that affirmed I had made the right choice. He pushed the documents back across the table. "Dad," he said, "I don't want it. Not like this. I want to make my own way. Just knowing you believe in me is enough." In that moment, I had never been prouder. We came to a compromise. The money would remain in his trust for him to use as he saw fit for his future, for his own family someday. But he would finish his degree, start his career, and build his own life first. He understood what his siblings never did, that my greatest gift to him wasn't money, but the values of hard work, integrity, and self-respect. My life is quieter now, but more peaceful. The constant drain on my finances and my spirit is gone. I have learned the hardest lesson a parent can learn, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your children is to let them fall so they can finally learn how to stand on their own 2 feet. Actions have consequences, and entitlement is a disease that can only be cured by a harsh dose of reality. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel and share your own thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and remember to value the people in your life who respect you, not just what you can do for them.